Good afternoon, Dr. DeMartini. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful you're here, and I'm so grateful to you that you've been actually mentoring me for the last 2 years. I've done a few breakthroughs with you. I've done the prophecy for 7 days about how to empower the 7 areas of life. And as you know, I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, a life and wellness coach, and the only Siddha Yoga practitioner in Australia. I would like to have a conversation with you about yoga, breathing techniques, and meditation.
Okay, sounds great.
Maybe we start with your first experience when you encounter yoga, breathing techniques, meditation. When did it happen, and why? And does it serve you still today?
The very first time I really met anybody that was doing yoga was in Hawaii. I'd seen a few people, but I actually interacted with a yogi. And I was sitting there with a friend on a beach, and there was a gentleman who was doing a headstand on the beach in the sand. And I was intrigued by it. I thought, what an interesting thing to be doing on the beach right in front of the surf. And as he came out of this posture, this asana, he then turned to us and looked directly at us and walked right over to us and sat across from us. And he says, if you'd ever like to experience the power of the mind, you might want to consider meditation and yoga. and at the time, I was just like, that's an interesting thing to do. It was almost like a sign. And then probably 2 months later, I had a kind of a brush with death, a very close call. And I almost died and had about 3.5 days unconscious. And a lady who found me in a tent where I was living, unconscious, turning conscious, led me to a little health food store to try to recover, to try to get nutrients in me because I was also not eating well. And there was a Afro-American white albino African guy sitting at this little booth at this health food store while I was getting a sandwich. And he saw that I had spasms because I almost died of strychnine poisoning. And he said, you need to take a yoga class.
Oh my God.
And learn how to have mind over body. And that was the second message about yoga. And I was leaving that little health food store just a couple days later, I'm guessing. And there was a special flyer on the door. Special guest speaker, Paul C. Bragg, so-and-so's yoga class. And because I'd had those two mentions of yoga, I saw that little flyer and I said, maybe it'd be wise for me to go to this. Now, I never attended classes at the time. I was a surfer guy, didn't go to school. And I decided to go to this yoga class. And I walked into this little recreation hall, and it was a wooden floor, 35 students sitting on mats and towels. And this woman yogi introduced Paul Bragg. And Paul Bragg was this elderly gentleman who had inspired lots and lots of people around the world and was involved in trying to create a health crusade to try to change people's health consciousness, who was also into yoga. So he began to speak, and that night I was so inspired by what he said that my life changed. And during that, towards the end of the presentation, he did an alpha meditation. So he introduced us to what he called alpha meditation, to bring the brain waves into alpha. And he took us through this guided imagery meditational experience. And that's where I saw my vision to do what I'm doing even today. And I wasn't expecting that, but that was a very transformational evening for me, one of the biggest moments of my life. When I left there, I decided to continue my interest in yoga. And I got a yoga book, and I went to a yoga class, and I started meditating and doing what I could from the book on yoga. And apparently I was adept at it. I was agile and limber. So Hatha yoga. This wasn't philosophical yoga and jnana yoga and various other types of yoga, just Hatha yoga at the time. And meditation. And I learned about pranayama there and about the breathing and variations of the breathing. Not just one-to-one ratios, but various ratios for different effects. And I started doing that every day. In fact, I have a picture of me that was just sent to me from 1973 that a friend had that I didn't even know it existed, of me sitting in a lotus position in California. It's something I just got sent just 3 months ago. So I started doing yoga. It wasn't intention to teach, but I just did it because I wanted to. I noticed that I surfed better. I noticed that I was more moderate in my behavior. I wasn't as volatile in my emotions. I wasn't as volatile in my eating. I saw the benefits of it. And I started doing breathing techniques, meditation technique, and Hatha yoga. I then moved back. Well, I flew back from Hawaii to Los Angeles, hitchhiked back to Texas, and found a little health food store there, which turned out to be one of the biggest health food stores in America at the time. And there was a yoga class mentioned by this lovely Indian woman, and so I decided to enroll. I eventually got a job at this health food store and started doing yoga every day with this woman. And I was then guided to do more accurate asanas. And I did more breathing. So every lunch I did yoga and breathing. In the evenings I did yoga and breathing. I lived in these little meditation rooms, these little pyramidal rooms that were for yoga. And so I did that. And then by the time I was 19, people were, late 18, 19 almost, people were coming up to me, seeing me do meditation and sitting in this odd position with my shoes off, in a lotus position, doing meditation for sometimes 2 hours. And they would just sit me in a seat. I wouldn't move. And they were intrigued, and they would gather around and start asking questions. So I started teaching classes, and people started asking me if I could teach them yoga.
You were teaching meditation classes?
I started teaching classes on breathing, meditation, yoga.
Good to know.
It just happened. It wasn't intended. It wasn't something I thought, I'm going to do it. The people just kept asking me.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 19, I had a little yoga class at the library at Wharton, and I had it outdoors. I used to do exercises like imagine myself surrounded by ice in the middle of the 100-degree weather and not sweat. I try to use my mind over body. I was intrigued by that. So I started doing that, and I taught at classes. And then when I went on to University of Houston from Wharton, I continued my yoga, and I did it under the trees every day. There's this kind of park area, and people started gathering again. And I'd have between 150, 125, 150, up to 400 people sometime just gathered around watching me do yoga. And they would ask questions on philosophy, diet, breathing, yoga, meditation, all kind of stuff. And when it would rain, I would go into the cafeteria. It was real cold, I would be in the cafeteria, and we would do it there. Then when I went on to professional school, I had a yoga class in my apartment. It's not a big one, maybe most we could get in there is 15 people. They were everywhere where they could see me in little nooks. And I would teach them breathing techniques and meditation techniques and what I knew about Hatha yoga. By then I was studying philosophy and other aspects of yoga. So it was, because yoga is all-encompassing. People think of in the Western world of yoga as asanas. But it's all-encompassing. It's the study of cosmology, the study of the universe. It's a study of why are we here, everything. So I started to broaden my horizons of what this was and studied comparative religions and philosophies. And so my yoga classes really started becoming educational as much as Hatha and just breathing. But I did that, and I developed a breathing technique that I shared with a San Jacinto College track team and showed them how to reduce the time needed for stretching by a breathing technique. because I learned by then physiology, and learned that breathing can change the hydrogen receptors and the pH receptors in the synovial joints. And you can do breathing in 5 to 10 minutes and do and accomplish more than experts in the area of stretching. So from that day on, even to this day, some of those teams started using the breathing techniques that I taught on for sports. And then I started using it for health purposes and having people who had health issues, hypertension and other conditions, and started teaching that as just part of a routine. When I got into clinical time, I continued my yoga, and I had my patients come for yoga classes. And then I found this other yogi. When I got into practice, I had a yogi come to my office. Instead of me teaching it, I had this woman yogi come, and she would bring her clients, and I would get patients out of it, and then I would teach chiropractic to the yoga students. And so I had her now giving me guidance, feedback, and I was giving her what I knew, and we kind of did a bartering exchange. And I taught yoga all the way until I was probably 39. So for about 21 years, I taught yoga. And then I did breathing techniques probably beyond that. I always said, as the breath wanders, so is the mind. As the mind wanders, so is the breath. And if you change your breath, you change your mind. And if you inhale, you activate the sympathetic. If you exhale, you activate the parasympathetic. There was a book that came out called Freedom from Stress by Phil Nurnberger. And it was about kind of yogi. He was from the Himalayan Institute. And he had yogic insights and physiology and breathing. And I use that for my patients. And and today I'm not teaching yoga, but I'll do it for myself. When I get onto my ship, I live on a ship, as you know. When I get to my ship in about 6 days, I will resume a daily routine of yoga, because sometimes my schedule is very intense and I don't have the ease to do it because my schedule.
Are you using it, let's say, before you speak to the thousands of people, or when you have this, you're teaching to millions of people, you do a lot of conferences? Are you using breathing techniques and meditation before you're going to enter to stage, or it's already in you and you don't need to do it anymore?
Well, if I have had very little sleep,
yes,
I know how to use the breathing to reactivate. If I am going to have a flight that is only 4 hours, and I speak when I get there, and it's 12 o'clock midnight, and I speak, and I get there at 8 and I start, I'll use another breathing technique to go to sleep, and just meditate instead of sleep.
What about managing your stress?
I don't have a lot of stress, really. I mean, I don't have a lot of. I've delegated everything. All I do is research, write, travel, teach. I mean, sometimes I have stress, like my sandwich was delayed.
Yes.
I want to be here on time, but I don't have enormous amounts of stress. So I've structured my life through delegation, that everything other than research, write, travel, teach is gone. But I do the meditation sometimes as contemplation on what I want to share, sometimes just to refocus from something else I'm doing. I may be doing an interview on a completely different topic, and I may have 15 minutes to change focus. I'm pretty good at being present no matter what it is. But so I'll do breathing, I'll do meditation, I'll use it to wake up or sleep.
Build up your energy back.
Yep, if there's a need for it. It's not all the time, that's occasional. But I still use it. I mean, it's still part of not as a ritual like it was, because sometimes I'm finishing up a seminar and I'm jumping over to an airport and I'm flying and I'm on a plane and I may do some stretching on there, but I don't really get to do my yoga routine there because they're not allowed to be on the floor. But sometimes in airports I've done it. In fact, I've been thought weird in an airport. I try to find a private place, but I sometimes go to the Muslim prayer center. But I'm not teaching yoga classes today, although sometime in my classes, when people ask certain questions, I'll bring it out.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah, and I'll bring it out. So I'm fully aware of many of the things that it has offered. I've studied various types of yoga, like I said, about 40 different versions of yoga. So from bhakti devotional yoga to meditation to contemplative yoga to breathing.
So John, as you know, my story with my dad who has been murdered in 93. As you understand, I had a lot of higher level of stress, anxiety. I couldn't really cope with this situation. So that's why 28 years ago, actually I started yoga, meditation, breathing techniques. And I have a question because, as you know, I was able through the years using these ancient techniques to be able to manage my stress better, to be more present. And even at the end, I was able to meet the criminal of my dad without guard and without handcuff, thanks to these ancient yogi techniques, using actually neuroscience and epigenetics. How do you explain it's possible that ancient tools using epigenetics and neuroscience works so well managing the stress?
Well, I think stress is the inability to adapt to a changing environment. And there's two forms. There's distress, which is illness promoting, and there's eustress. Eustress is pursuing challenges that inspire you, and it actually builds your immune system and helps you heal. Distress is when you're trying to escape things you don't want to have happen, and they come upon you, and you're not wanting it, and it keeps challenging you. When you're in distress, it means you have an imbalanced perspective. And yoga is a union of opposites. It's the bringing things back into balance. So anytime you can bring your mind into balance through breath and also through bodily synchronicities of opposites, flexions, extensions, rotations, internal, external rotations, abductions, adductions. Anytime you bring a balancing system to a body or a mind or a breath, you reduce the probability of stress. So I don't think that's neuroscience and epigenetics has added more details and subtle insights on how it works. But science has not debated or negated these tools for years. I mean, as far as I can remember, when I was 17, I have a picture of me doing yoga at 17. So I could show you a picture, I could send you a picture. So at 17, when I first started to study it and read it, I came across a gentleman named Gurudev, Tasmal Goswami Gurudeva. And he gave me a book on yogic healing. It was a brilliant book. And it was talking about various health conditions and what you could do with various types of yoga and breathing and asanas to assist in revitalizing the body and healing the body. And it was really brilliant. I think it was more advanced than people realized. I think today, if that book was to be analyzed and looked at it from neuropsychiatry and epigenetics and things, neuroplasticity, it would be appreciated even more because it was very brilliantly done. So these the trial and error or insight and inspiration, whatever led to eventually these insights that led to the art of yoga. And there's many fractions of yoga, as you know. I think that, I mean, just like I just recently presented a new text that I wrote on cosmology and astrophysics. And it was the Hindu yogis that had the most advanced cosmology known. In the Rig Veda, they talk about things that are now being contemplated today as cosmological theories. So the ekpyrotic theories of recycling universes and stuff were perceived back then. So some of these individuals that had been exploring their inner world as well as the outer world, the contemplation of how the universe is structured and within and without led to some great insights. And some of those we've just now reappreciated. So I think that we can learn something from that long history of culture. and I think it's even more ancient. They just recently found a 12,000-year-old site in India. So it's probably much older, like they're finding everywhere else. Man is much older than we thought, or humanity is anyway. So we've been searching for solutions for people's problems for many, many millenniums, and some people have categorized it and cataloged it and structured it, and the Eastern mystics did a great job at putting a lot of it together.
Yeah, it's like the vibration of the sun is the sound Om, and actually I'm working with a yogi called Master Jyoti, and he was telling me for many centuries we're telling the world that the sound of vibration is Om. Nobody is believing us, and not recently, like a few years ago, the NASA discovered that the vibration of Om is, the vibration of the sun is Om. So in all the yogic practice, we're using mantra meaning the sound of the mind. What do you want to explain about the mantra and the vibration effect on our body? And I just want to share with you as well a story where actually I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it's when he touched my hands. He put actually my hands in his hands, and he touched his forehead to my forehead. As soon as he did this, like I felt like it was kind of electroshock, like vibration was so strong. So vibration is really important, right? So what would be actually the explanation of this vibration between humans, vibration of the sun, which is the Om? So if we do more sun gazing, we have more energy. Can you share something about the vibration,
well,
the mantra?
Mantra means a tool for. Its etymology means the tool for contemplating, the tool for exploring the universe. And neuroscience and physiology has now developed tools. They are able to measure femtosecond vibrations in little proteins. Your body has got enzymes that are functional proteins and structural proteins that make up collagen and spectrin and many other fiber tissues that make up the interstitial as well as the intercellular structures. And each of these little proteins, many of them are what they call liquid crystals. And these liquid crystals are repeating units of fibers or proteins that have a polarity to them. And they vibrate at very, very high frequencies. Literally femtoseconds and picoseconds. And anything that's that frequency, anywhere else in the cell or tissues, there's a resonation. And in any octave of that, or any interval that it's based on, can resonate. And they now know that there's intercommunication between cells and tissues by these vibrations. When somebody does a mantra, the normal vibratory rhythms that are in the body can be organized. In the heart, you have a sinoatrial node that is the pacemaker of the beating, of the autorhythmicity of the heart. And all of the other, from the sinoatrial node to the AV bundles, down into the Purkinje fibers and all the way down to the cells, myoepicardial cells, there's a sequence, and the fibering, the sinoatrial node, when it fires, it sets a sequence to cause rhythm. The brain is now known to do that. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is basically a pacemaker of many of the resonations in the body. And then inside those resonations are subresonations. And so when we are doing breathing, we're unifying those and letting them work together. When we're doing the mantra, we're also unifying them and integrating them together. So anything that can integrate the body helps longevity. They found out that the telomeres at the ends of the genes are elongated by telomerase when you're in an alpha state and when you're in a resonant state. So if you're doing a mantra and you're doing breathing, a pranayama, and you're in sync, there's a lot of physiological impact that goes on. Genetically, there's literally rhythms in the body. They start synchronizing. and you have a symphony instead of a cacophony. And the symphony is wellness promoting and longevity promoting. And we tend to go into our forebrain and have more foresight and vision, and we're more masters of our destiny instead of victims of our history. So the ancient tool is, they've used metronomes in meditation, they've used mantras in meditation, they've used breathing, they've used focus on the heart. There's many little tools that one could use. There's mudras that they use to synchronize, to concentrate things. All of them have unquestionable impact on physiology and psychology. So science, as it emerges, will probably uncover even greater insights on the value of that over time. But the earth itself breathes and has a resonation, and it has its own geowind and its own sounds. And every one of the planets, and they just sent the sound from Mars. In fact, the first sounds of the winds of Mars yesterday. Everything has a sound. So the sound at NASA that's on the sun, which you can listen to online, I wasn't aware that it's Om, but I've certainly listened to the sound. But it is a mantra in a sense. It was the Swedenborg, the mystic that was Lord Swedenborg, who talked about the love and the wisdom of the sun being the light and the heat of the sun, the heat being love and the light being wisdom. And he was metaphorizing that as a tool. So the sun salute in yoga and the honoring of the sun, our entire life depends on what they call autotrophic sun radiation to cause the food chain to begin. So it's wise for us to honor the sun. So the sun salute in a state of gratitude in perfect harmony is a wise thing, because we give life from the sun. The sun is receiving light from the center of the galaxy, and which was Brahma in Hindu, and the sun was Krishna. So you could have you could give different personifications of these sounds. In Godfrey Higgins' work on sound, he showed that different syllables had different effects, and they had the sound of R meant authority, and Ah meant to project. So Ra meant projecting authority, and M was enclosure, because you close your mouth, and Ah was projection. So when they described in ancient Hindu the mantra Hare Krishna, for instance, they were basically Ramakrishna. They were basically describing the light and energy coming from the galaxy, going to the sun, being enclosed, and then continuing on to the earth, personified. And they were honoring that. So we're breathing that sun. The prana that we're breathing is like the positrons and electrons that are byproducts, that are entangled byproducts of light. And we now think that maybe in Ho's work on the rainbow and the worm, there's a belief that maybe that this entangled light is a very key to life in cells. So this prana, breath of positrons and electrons, positive and negatively charged particles of light that come from the sun, has deep meaning. So it's the physiology and the study of physics of this is concordant with this ancient tradition.
And let me share something with you, people who are listening to us. You know my son Nino. He's coming to your class as well. He has done the prophecy with you. He had actually a spine surgery last year in December. And I was teaching him these ancient breathing techniques with meditation. And he didn't need any painkillers, so it was like a spine surgery. Normally you have the need to take morphine. You wake up, no pain. So that's really an amazing testimonial, because I noticed that through the breathing techniques, is meditation, is exercise, is yoga, you actually affect even your body in a way that you don't have the pain.
Yes.
I know it's very extreme, but I wanted to share this with you.
Well, Anaxagoras, Anaxagoras, who's a pre-Socratic philosopher of the 7th to 6th century BC, was a writer on pain. And John Bonica, who's one of the most respected pain specialists today, refers to Anaxagoras' ideas. He called pain the private sensation of hurt. That's perceptual. And Anaxagoras said that lopsided perceptions can give rise to pain. So if a person knows how to breathe properly and center their perceptions, they can transcend their thalamic gating of pain and literally regulate the pain thresholds. Yogis have been doing this for centuries. They used to do, John Basmajian in his biofeedback autoregulation systems use yogis as demonstrations to slice a part of the skin and it would bleed, and the yogis who had trained would cut the blood supply off with their minds and literally heal it in 1/3 the time. And they would just regulate with autoregulation various types of parts of the body that most people don't know how to do. So the yogis have a lot to insights that we can learn from. But breathing, if a person's in breathing, I mean, mothers do it for pain and delivery of birth. If we breathe a certain way, we can literally regulate our pain thresholds. And if we perceive more drawbacks and benefits, we can accentuate the pain and lower the threshold. And if we do the opposite, we can raise the threshold and we can tolerate the pain. So we have the ability with our mind and our breath to impact pain thresholds.
Yeah, that's true. And still about Master Jyoti, that I'm going to spend actually 1 year with him in India. He really emphasizes on the fact that people, when they have health, they really should keep the health. Because if they don't have good health, they have to go on healing. And then if the healing doesn't work, they have to go on spirituality. So it's better to keep our health on track. Do you believe that even someone who doesn't have health and he went to healing, doesn't work, then he goes to spirituality, do you think there's a way to come back to health?
Well, I think that when people...
We met actually with this reason. 2 years ago I met one of your students, and she really inspired me that she actually being cured for cancer with your work, with your method. So I just want you to explain maybe this possibility.
I think when people have some form of illness, they usually don't want to face it and believe it first. And then they wait and see what nature does. And if it doesn't go away, over a period of time, they may start looking for alternatives. And they'll try conservative approaches commonly, unless they're brainwashed by allopathic medicine. And then they'll jump for a pill or something. But eventually, if that doesn't work, they'll finally go and get some expert help. But as you know, if you go to a surgeon, you'll probably have an organ removed. You go to a chiropractor, you'll probably have an adjustment. You go to an herbalist, you'll get some herbs. You go to a nutritionist, you get some vitamins. Whatever you go to is what you're going to get. And so it's always wise to go as conservative as possible. But when people have been told that there's nothing they can do, or they don't know what the reason is and they think it's in their mind or something like that, they may go to a last resort. They may go to a more esoteric approach. And in some cases that actually does change the physiology. In some cases that temporarily forestalls other treatment. It depends on the situation, but we know that the mind, at least 35% of our healing is our own mind, placebo. And there's nocebo and placebo. Nocebo can actually cause more pain, and placebo can reduce the pain or the symptoms. And what we say to ourselves and think for ourselves impacts our outcome. We have unconscious motives sometimes to have symptoms. So probing into the mysteries of our mind and what we're actually consciously and unconsciously thinking and contemplating, I think it would have tremendous merit, and it's wise to have in every form of healing art that approach. But sometimes they'll go to that outrage, and then they'll realize that no, that's working either. And so they may go back to some really basics. They may say, okay, I'm now going to eat very, very wisely. I'm going to get rest. I'm going to walk. I'm going to drink a lot of water. I'm going to start meditating. I'm going to start doing something that's meaningful and inspiring because it helps my immune system. And they start going back to some really basic ingredients to master life with. Paul Bragg called them the 7 doctors. And make sure they don't put in their body anything that's not real food. And their body sometimes does amazing things. I really don't know what the limits of the body are because I've seen some amazing things that are hard to explain sometimes.
And you explained about the lifespan. It could be increased by 120 years if you really not only, I would say, make your physical and your mind flexible, but you mentioned as well in your teaching that if you live with your highest value, then your lifespan will increase because we work on the glial cells.
Yeah, if we live congruently with what we value most, many people, instead of living in alignment with what they value most and living by priority and filling their day with things that inspire them, they compare themselves to other people. They minimize themselves to others that they put on pedestals. They inject those people's values into their life. They cloud the clarity of what they feel their mission is. And they end up having cacophony because they're now confused and internally conflicted with imperative responsibilities that they think that they're supposed to live by, that are duties based on other people's values. And that creates cacophony and chaos in the body. And the body is creating symptoms for a reason. The body is creating symptoms to let you know you're not being authentic. So the breathing can give us the ability to have the courage to be authentic. And yoga helps that. But still living by priority, and if you live by priority, you think, what is the highest priority thing I can eat? What is the highest priority thought? What is the highest priority liquid? What is the highest priority way of breathing? Because, I mean, if I'm breathing deeply, diaphragmatically, I get more vitality than if I breathe shallow in my chest. What is the highest priority social interaction I could have? What's the highest priority things I could feed my mind and read? If a person goes to prioritizing according to what they value most, they start living in a more congruent way, and they decrease the probability of having infirmaries. So it's to our advantage to prioritize our life. But I think that's what yoga is really about, ultimately. It's about contemplating what's really the most significant thing, which is, you know, a yogi that I studied under probably when I was 27, he asked a question, who are you? And most of the people in the class said, well, I'm my body. And he said, so if I took away your arm, would you still be you? If I took away your leg, would you still be you? And if I took out some organs, would you still be you? And they started thinking, well, yes. I said, so are you just the organs and tissues and structures, or is there something more? He was looking deeper. And so it was an ontological pursuit that he was initiating, and an understanding of what our inner being is. And so with that perspective, once we contemplate that we may have something more than just our physical structure, a hedonistic to eudaimonic pursuit of meaning and purpose comes alive. And then we can contemplate, well, what's the purpose of purpose? What's teleological for? And because we find that we function better if we have some meaning in our life. Viktor Frankl showed that in the concentration camps. The people that had meaning lived. The other ones died. So meaning is the mean between polarities. And yoga is the science of mean, the meaning between. It's the golden mean, you might say. So there's many, many facets of yoga and breathing and pranayama that has got deeper impact than first thought. So, yeah, I think that if we have the power of our mind to center ourselves, it's to our advantage.
Yeah, actually, last week I was speaking to Dr. Alok Pandey. He's actually from the ashram of Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry. And they really actually developed the integral yoga. So it's not only yoga, asanas, breathing techniques, or meditation. It's really a type of yoga where you do yoga like right now. We connect. And what was really interesting is for them the connection with the divine. And I know you're very fond with this idea that the universe is love. And
Well, Sri Aurobindo, in his Life Divine, which is a great text, which I've referenced,
yeah, I know you're.
and I've told people to read this book many times, was a bit of a synthesis, a syncretic integration of various yogis and Western thinking. And he attempted to take kind of the science of the times when he wrote it, which has been updated since, and merge it with the mystical traditions, and put it together in the Life Divine and the pursuit of it. I summarized that book many years ago, found it very intriguing. And I think I would say it's still solid material today. It's still valid use. And he was a political activist, so he's trying to transform the culture with that information. And he had a cause and a meaning. He's a bit of a renegade to some people, but he also impacted a lot of change. So, yeah, I think we're wise. I think the world has an east and west for a reason, and I think that's we have an eastern hemisphere, you might say, which is like the right hemisphere, and the western hemisphere, which is like the left hemisphere. And I mean that's very generic and it's very polarized. It's kind of dimorphic, but still, there's a study there that we're wise to learn from both sides. The science and the religion. I think Einstein said it, religion without science and science without religion is lame and blind. I learned a little of both.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Thank you for your time, and I see you tomorrow.
Yes, very good. Thank you for the